Well, welcome to episode 8 of The Sleeping Man, and today we'll be talking about cannabis law and how it's affecting New York State. What you need to understand, too, is the history of the cannabis plant and who were the culprits involved in making it illegal.
At that time, oil companies were expanding at great speed, but were likely to see their investments vanish by the mass production of cannabis, which offered a much cleaner and more economical fuel. Nor should we forget the young pharmaceutical industry, which was financed by two other powerful bankers, John Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie. These people were conducting an all-out campaign to eliminate the accepted natural herbal treatments, including cannabis, from the pharmacopoeia, while trying to replace them with drugs created in the laboratory. Furthermore, Rockefeller was also the owner of Standard Oil, which had already started to invade America with its refineries and its service stations. Thus was born this natural alliance between the synthetic textile industry, the oil industry, the producers of plastics and its derivatives, and the pharmaceutical industry. They all needed to get rid of the common enemy as soon as possible.
These high school boys and girls are having a hop at the local soda fountain. Innocently they dance, innocent of a new and deadly menace lurking behind closed doors. Marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide.
And who were the culprits involved in making it illegal? A lot of people don't understand that. I've given lectures on it. Interestingly enough, the first two, I had a blindfold DEA agents right there listening to me. And it was interesting why they were there. They weren't there to arrest me. They were there to try and figure out whether there was room. They have their own drug problem. A lot of guys with PTSD, things like that. And they were there to try and understand this plant called hemp and cannabis. We do talk about the results we've seen in California and how that has all turned out in a collapsing cannabis industry. The legal industry, the illegal industry is thriving. There's 3,000 to 5,000 illegal businesses right now in California. So with that said, and moving ahead, listen to this episode, listen with an open mind. I think you're going to find it really interesting, even if you're not interested in cannabis law, because we get into a lot of things that are occurring in the underbelly of an industry that holds so much promise, both at the tax level for the states, but also at the wellness level for the consumer. Have a listen. So this is episode 8 of Sleeping Man. Today we're discussing something very interesting, at least to us here in New York. We're going to be discussing the plight to legalizing cannabis at the consumer level. And today I've got we've got what I call generational podcast. We've got myself, who's old. I won't get into how old, because the beauty products I produce make me look way younger. But anyway, that's a whole other story. I've got David Falkowski. David is the owner of Open Minded Organics. Him and I collaborate a lot. We met a few years ago, and we're also interested in getting involved in the cannabis industry. And then I have Josh Peets, who is our producer here, but very interested in the cannabis industry, has stayed on top of it. Young guy, I thought it'd be interesting to have a perspective of different demographics. I obviously came from a time when cannabis was like, it turned you into a sex maniac. And never happened. I've smoked it till I almost died. It just hasn't happened. So I don't know. That's just part of the
You find you the right one there, buddy.
That's true. That's true. I should have conferred with you.
Have you tried Maui Wowie? I mean, I can only speculate where the name came from.
I think I have, but that's a whole other discussion. So, but today, I guess we're doing this because we're a little concerned, right? I'll say that what happened was I had gotten a telephone call by a reporter, and Bill Weinberg from Cannabis Now, and he said, "Hey, I want to talk to you about the illegal dispensaries in New York." And we knew, right? We knew all about the fact that they were having like farmers markets things down there where they were in parks selling cannabis. They were selling little of the hallucinogenic mushrooms, magic mushrooms. But I don't know that I knew about dispensaries. Like I'm walking into a dispensary and I'm going to buy cannabis, weed, whatever you want to call it. And as that started to register inside my head, all of a sudden I thought back to my past and I said, we are in an industry that is completely, the consumer's confused, we're confused. The only people not confused are the people out there doing cannabis. I was out there selling it, making $10,000 a day. They're the ones that aren't confused. The rest of us are confused. And I was just saying, back in the day when Napster, I was there at the digital, the whole digital revolution that occurred with records and decimated the record industry, almost decimated the movie industry. But I was there, and the biggest problem was the consumer was confused. He didn't know whether it was legal to download something, not illegal to download. They just didn't know. They figured, oh, it must be because it's there. So when somebody's walking into a dispensary today, they're probably thinking, oh, yeah, this must be legal. And, nobody's paying attention to this like we are. And I guess that's where the conversation starts. And it kind of starts in California. David, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm going to follow your lead here because these are dizzying times.
Right.
It's whether you're the juvenile in the play yard or the college kid in the dorm room, or maybe just the elderly folk with a little bit of vertigo. Whatever your experience is, this is dizzying right now.
Right.
Yeah. The water has been muddied, and that's been somewhat intentional. And I guess that's what we're digging into here.
Yeah. What we're trying to find out. So if you look back at California announced, and I think we're in a worse position than what California was at the time. When you look back at California, they announced they were going to legalize consumer cannabis. And what ensued was obviously the licensing regulatory process. But while that was going on, I don't know if it's at the extreme. I think New York may be in a much more horrific situation. But during that period of time to where we are today, there are any estimate between 3,000 and 5,000 illegal cannabis businesses that operate in California. Compare that to 831 legal dispensaries. And what you've got just recently was the association that trade association for cannabis put the Governor Newsom on alert to say, hey, the industry is going to collapse. The legal industry is going to collapse. And what has been the trend out there is if you have a legal dispensary, you have two illegal dispensaries. And because you can't make money with a legal dispensary, just to kind of give the average cost to operate a dispensary anywhere is about $1 million a year. So compare that to, $20,000 in rent, a few people selling their stuff inside a building. It's probably costing you, let's just say $300,000, $250,000. How does a legal dispensary compete with that? And we'll get into the numbers. They get far worse because I've done the research. But I guess that is the problem. Why, when we all are here, we were in the CBD business. We were there. We saw the issue with that. When I say the issue, the collapse of the CBD industry, and now that's kind of rebuilding itself. But the cannabis industry hasn't even gotten started, and the numbers are they blew me away. As of yesterday, I was blown away by where the numbers are. When you look at 5,000 illegal operating businesses in California, it leaves it wide open for organized crime. And we'd be kidding ourselves, especially as we get into this podcast, to think that organized crime isn't here. But David, you were the one that kind of told me about what was going on in the city as far as the farmers markets are concerned.
Yeah, so Greg called me the other day, and it was us having a good day. It was just kidding. It was a rough day, and
Yeah.
for those of us who have slogged through the hemp program here in New York, on the precipice of this adult use stuff, and we all have friends, allies, cohorts, enemies, but hopefully you talk with all of them, and things we hear right now, about the cannabis space. Like, so some of us are trying to actively work and guide regulation and common sense in this new program. But there's so many people right now, they're not waiting for regulations, guidelines, guidance, permission, licenses, any of it. They're just out there selling cannabis. And as it really turns out, it's turning into an open drug bazaar in many places. I think, Greg already, said it casually here, just a little earlier. All of a sudden, psychedelic mushrooms show up and possibly some other pharmacologicals. And so, like there's a conflation here, we're talking about the medicinal uses or the adult uses of marijuana, but now, whether we like it or not, in this lack of regulation, clarity, sustainability in the industry, whatever it is, there's this whole other industry boiling up from underneath. And somebody, we have a shop here in town in Sac Harbor, and every week people come in because, it's the East End, the Hamptons. So we get a lot of people from Manhattan back and forth the weekends, sometimes the weekday, or hey, just even the COVID refugee. And many of them, not gonna say a lot, like many, but a bunch of them have come in and they're upset that we don't have marijuana to sell them. They're like, well, what do you mean? I can just literally go to my corner bodega and, just buy weed. And they're like, matter of fact, mushrooms and like other stuff. And so talking to a couple of people on this, and somebody is strongly suggesting that a lot of that product that's virtually on literally every corner, who's cornered the market, are actually cartels. A lot of these illicit grows, when we look back earlier in the season to put things in context, I think it was Jackson County, Oregon, they virtually declared a state of emergency, like, under the guise of, hemp, all of these farms, these light deprivation greenhouses basically pull a tarp over so you can shorten the days of the light cycle earlier, bring a crop in earlier. And there are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of greenhouses popping up over the landscape. And all that product has to go somewhere. And it's being run by somebody. And somebody's really suggesting that these are cartels behind many of these large operations. They're highly organized. That's scary. Flat out scary.
Yeah.
Here I am, 20 years a farmer, in the legal hemp space since 2017. And I'm like day to day right now, juggling the money, because every time I get a check in, most of it's literally going to compliance costs, like trying to do the right thing.
Right.
Let's put this in a little other context. We're talking about money and segueing into things. To bring light, well, actually, Fox News did the other day. They did this great report on Uncle Bud, the mobile truck there in Harlem. And he's now franchised and has other vehicles. Uncle Bud, yeah. And it's just like amazing to see this on Fox News. He explains literally, hey, we just ask for a suggested donation. We have all of this stuff. And, they claim how they keep the block clean. There's no crime. They educate people about, the health benefits. And in the background, during, he's like, oh yeah, we've expanded. I'm showing my buddy Mike in the coffee shop. And it was like, kind of like a bus, like a party bus kind of vehicle, lettered, stickered up, the whole thing. He's like, oh man, who's backing this guy? He's like, you see that rig there? And I was like, yeah. He's like, that's a $75,000 vehicle. He's kind of like a vehicle geek guy. He knows the price on everything. I'm like, Mike, he doesn't have a backer. The guy's probably making $5,000 to $10,000 a day cash. That's the whole thing. This is all cash business on the roadside, right out in front of the cops. And I'm not complaining at all. I'd like just a nod, like, do I need to go broke achieving compliance, or can I like go set up one block over from Uncle Bud over here and hop in? So when we talk about the water being muddied, we talk about equal opportunities here. This is dizzying.
Yeah, and just to your point on that, so confirmed the bodegas, and we're going to get into that, the numbers, but I want to go back to California for a minute. I pulled up the California tax department. The California Department of Tax and Free Administration recently issued data on taxable sales and cannabis tax collections for Q3 2021. Taxable sales for Q3 were 1.24 billion, a steep 12.5% quarter-on-quarter decline not an increase, a decline in that market over the 1.41 billion in Q2 of 2021. So the whole thing is, and let's just take a look at the dynamics of numbers, because New York City, right? If you're going to go do something wrong, you can just blend in down there, right? And it's become a lawless city for all intents and purposes. We really don't have, we've become a lawless nation almost in reality. I mean, I'm just going to call it the way it is because everybody knows they can get it. When you can walk into CVS and steal $1,000, you can break the windows at Louis Vuitton and steal $100,000 and not be too worried about being arrested or prosecuted. It creates an interesting environment just across the board for everything. But let's just think about this here. Here's an interesting number. New York City relies on the bodega industry. Guess how many of the bodegas there are in New York?
200.
Okay. There are 14,000 bodegas in New York. So when you look at the dynamics of that, wow. 14,000 bodegas in New York, right? And then you sit there and you are figuring, okay, there are 3,000 to 5,000 illegal businesses in California. The infrastructure and density of California spread out over Los Angeles is spread out over, 50 square miles. I think that's what last time I remember hearing that. But when you look at 14,000 outlets in the city, just in the bodegas, not the guys that are opening up dispensaries and selling in, New York. Last time I was in New York, I didn't smell fresh air the whole time I was there. I'm driving down Johnson Boulevard. I'm driving down the expressway and I rolled my window down real quick and all I smelled was weed. And from that point on, all I smelled was weed the whole time I was there. And that's not exaggerating. I was like, holy shit. But the thing is, with 14,000 bodegas, all they've got to do is get 10% of those. It's 1,400 outlets. We know that that's been pretty deeply infiltrated. I can't believe the state doesn't know that. We know that. How come they don't know that? And I guess it's the unintended consequences. I still can't, this is all supposed to be about tax money. And right now, I just don't get it. I really struggle with it. And not only that, but what you're talking about is the expense. We have lobbyists, we have attorneys. We're all trying to do the right thing. It costs a fortune. It costs a fortune just to get into the entry level. And here's an interesting stat too. I thought this was, I did a bunch of work. Cannabis capital raises decline in 2020. Investment, this is nationwide. Investment into cannabis brands, including capital raise, slowed dramatically in 2020. This is like such a little tiny number. People understood how capital markets work and private equity. 2.6 billion was raised. Now that seems like a lot of money, but really not a lot of money. And the first half of 2020, they saw 67% decline in private equity. Now, why would that matter, to us? Well, it may not matter to us. We may have resources we can do things with to get there. But what really matters is what the state's mantra was during this was to build equity, to build legacy wealth for minorities. Well, if they can't get capital, it goes right back to the big industry is going to move in and take it over because there's no incentive. And if you make the barrier to entry so difficult on a business level, you're not going to get there. And this is the question I have. I'm in front of the legislators. I've been in front of the legislators. I have not been in front of them since we discovered this. And just the bodega number by itself, 14,000 of them. It's not going to take a lot just to dwarf where we are. I think the last number I saw, California did 3 billion. I mean, they were supposed to be 12. I think they forecasted that at 12 billion. Years later, here we are. They just hit 3 billion. It's just, I think Arizona hit the highest number this year. I think it was Arizona, then California, then it was like Michigan. It wasn't any of these big populated states. California, just by its size, is going to be on the charts, but it's not like it's, like they're really doing something that the numbers are expected. We were forecasted at 7 billion. That's what the bankers that evaluate this industry. 7.5 billion was what New York was forecasted to do. And I'll tell you, I don't know, because we don't know, because it's all underground.
Are they talking to the bodega shop owners? How do you translate, are they, so stickers, right? A lot of these, dispensaries or bodega shops, whatever, these pop-ups, they call them sticker shops. You go and you buy a $40, $50, $60 sticker, and then they give you a bag of flour of some
Right.
weed. So, I mean, when they're making projections on the industry, I mean, I wonder how much of that is like allocated or misallocated as like, stickers. I'd like to see like, the sticker sale projection in the next 5 years in New York State, if it's going to continue going the way it is now. So my point is, who are they getting this information from? Like what rain cloud are they pulling this bucket of water out of?
Right.
Us, the stakeholders, we can't even wrap our minds around this.
No, we can't wrap our minds about it, but it's interesting because what do we know about business? Business will follow the path of least resistance. That's what we know, that's why entrepreneurs build things that they feel have a use in the market, and business will follow the path of least resistance. I think that I don't know if they thought it out at all. There were so many mistakes to look at. California is the poster boy for mistakes about this industry. So I don't know why they didn't look at California. And here's the question I have overall. Why would they make it legal before they had any place to sell it? It doesn't make any sense. In other words, why didn't we open up a dispensary, our first dispensary, manufacturing, growing, all of that, and then wait a month, issue the license, wait a month, and then legalize the product itself? I just don't know why they legalized it first. Do you have any insight into that? I don't know.
I think really, a lot of it just comes down to just the way the legislative process works, right? There was dueling cannabis legalization regulation bills for a while. Even up into this last cycle, there was the CRT, the cannabis that was Cuomo's version. Then there was the MRTA, and so this is a law. And so to decriminalize marijuana and give opportunity and all these other things, that's the statute that was passed. But then a lot of the details comes out in the regulations. So that's why, we have legal cannabis now, but we don't have the regulations to cultivate, manufacture, and dispense. Further, you put a couple things in there. It's really important. I don't mean to pick on anybody, but there was a gentleman previously, Norm Birnbaum, who was kind of like the cannabis czar. He was Cuomo's guy for years here in New York. And, he wasn't exactly very proactive in a lot of ways as far as getting a lot done really quick and building an industry. As I understand it, he'd probably be more content with one big MSO, multi-state operator, one huge organization, tax the crap out of them and call it a day. He wasn't.
Right.
But the fact that during the Cuomo administration, this passed, he sat on 2 key appointments for 6 months. Then there was a whole upheaval in his office and Norm went with him. And I'm assuming a lot of Norm's policies, so now you just lead to this time, which seems like stagnation, but is really just kind of like spring cleaning. All of a sudden we have the Cannabis Control Board fully appointed and they're meeting and they got a lot of stuff to catch up on. They've got a staff and they go some, legal procedures, even just to like authorize office space and hiring. And they are slowly passing some backlog legislation, like, the regulations for the hemp extract bill. Geez, that was passed in 2019.
Right.
It was, it took over 2 years to get these regulations, which were literally way too much, way too late. And so really it has to do with that process. They passed the MRTA. There was a delay. There was probably a lot of policy and regulation that was not going to be anywhere near close to what we hear mumblings of now. So that added delay to clear and start rewriting things. But if you look, there's Senator Hinchey just released presented a bill in the Senate for conditional licensing. So this is, a way to start, conditional is kind of like a provisional, something like early, that's hopefully would take some, not all, but some of the hemp infrastructure that was developed, those who had operated in compliance for a certain number of years have continued to demonstrate compliance. As I understand it, they're putting in like a mentorship thing, for legacy market and or, new folks to come in that don't have much cultivation experience. The whole opportunity to cultivate is capped at like 1 acre, so nobody's going to go huge in the first year. As I understand, it's written in there, no artificial lighting in the flowering canopy. So at least it kind of modulates a little bit, the playing field versus somebody that has like a 30,000 square foot, indoor facility versus somebody who's farming for the first time, 1 acre outdoor. If they hone their skills and they've got some great mentors, they can do some great stuff out of the gate. This is a difficult plant to cultivate. But that being said, there's things we're doing to kind of expedite the process, but things just take time. I don't know how many of you, I'm in Suffolk County, New York here, have recently tried to do something at the DMV. It's not like, oh, I have tomorrow off. I'm going to leave first thing in the morning. I'm going to be back in time to pick my kid up from school. You have to make appointments now. Now there's like this whole process. And even if you do go on Tuesday now, you have to wait for like your time slot. And I can only imagine all these calendars and, procedural protocols and just the legislative process. That's really what's slowing everything down. Isn't even cannabis related. It's just the way the world works these days.
Bureaucratic mess.
I'll make the comparison because I just don't know what else to compare it to. So if you look at the whole COVID thing on a national level, what's ended up happening with COVID, it's not a point to create protection, citizen protection, or protect the population. That's not what's happened now. COVID's kind of taken on this whole thing where it's become more of a wonky political process. A lot of people making decisions that don't have any, they're not scientists, they're not doctors, they're not anything. But they just kind of get involved in that process. It's heads down, and it's just, we got to create things to protect the public, which really is counterintuitive to what's going on. So now we switch it over to where we are with hemp, and I think it gets into, they're all legislating to death. You got a bunch of legislators in there, and I got to be honest. Of all the things, alcohol, I don't think alcohol has really any great use in Western civilization. I hate to say this, but I mean, have a drink or two. But when you look at the destruction of alcohol on our society, the people I know that have been to rehab, oh my God, the people that go $70,000 a month to try and get off booze. And then we have this product that is, and this kind of gets in, Josh and I have spoken about this to nauseam, how this became an illegal product. It was all politics. It was all about money. The most powerful men in the world were involved in making it illegal. At one point, we, the United States of America, were the most advanced in the research of cannabis and hemp and what it could do at the industrial level, at the human level, and just at the level where people use it to get high. And when you look at that, and when you look at, we've been to concerts, right? You go to a rock concert, everybody's drinking, you could get killed. You go to a Grateful Dead, somebody's going to throw a toasted cheese sandwich at you. That may be the most violence you see at that concert. It's just such the fact that they've had to come in and all these brainiacs had to decide what this was and what that was. And I just think it's been just a gigantic waste of time and effort. And we could have been 4 or 5 years ahead of the curve.
We're overthinking this. Yeah.
What's that?
It's getting overthunk.
Yeah, it's overthunk, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just become a process, not what's practical, where's the common sense in it. And unfortunately, the years and years of what I call THC phobia and weed phobia and everything attached to it, has just created this really difficult environment. As you know, David, no banks, no credit card processing. I spent the first year, the later half of the year, when finally banks said, "Oh, we can't bank with you because you're in the hemp industry," and then credit cards saying, "I got thrown off one of the PayPal businesses because I was executing credit cards on my phone." On my website. So people would call in, I'm executing those transactions. And we were doing it. We didn't think there was anything wrong with that. And then the company, Venmo was the company, they found out. And then I'm blackballed from there for the rest of my life. Not that I give a shit, but but it's just that's where we're at. It's such an it's so like no common sense. People haven't thought about this. And the thing is, you're talking about either cannabis or hemp, and the CBD industry, and really a hemp extraction, full spectrum hemp, that can really stop someone with an addiction, that can help somebody with an addiction. I don't know. Is there any recorded history of someone dying because they overdosed on a joint? I don't know that exists.
Wasn't there most recently a lawsuit? I think even with this was an MSO, multi-state operator, one of the larger entities in the country. They had a CBD product line, and somehow, as I understand it, a bottle of CBD oil was mislabeled. However it was, this is what GMPs and record keeping and traceability are for. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, accidents happen, I suppose. And it was a THC product, actually, as labeled as CBD. And as I understand it, some unsuspecting person consumed some, and it triggered a sequence of events that may have led to a death. Now, the fact that maybe they had a heart attack, or it stopped their heart or their breathing, like the way opiates work, they just stop your respiratory system. Right. That was not the case, but in like this indirect manner that it led to a sequence of events that led to a death. That's about the closest that I know, other than, maybe we hear of people, being intoxicated and doing things and being possibly involved in the more uncommon than not, automobile accident that's caused by marijuana. I mean, more often than not, when there's these bad ones, we usually hear that it's alcohol involved, that it's not just like, they found a joint in his mouth. It's, I think there's these lifestyles that lend themselves to certain kind of decision-making trees and paths. But yeah, it's the way they've even separated this whole plant. All of a sudden, CBD isolated with a little bit of THCs and a couple patented and approved medications. So now, like, a bunch of hippies and humans who have been growing this plant forever, who are the original stewards since they started collecting and replanting seeds, right? These people, all of a sudden they can't make a hash oil or a resin that's just naturally dominant in this, right? I mean, that's right. When I grow Suver Haze, the Crawford brothers, amazing stable genetics. I love how it grows here on Eastern Long Island. It's very suitable for the region. And, when we make a tincture, remove the alcohol, and we have this hash oil left that, it's federally illegal because a drug company figured out how to isolate CBD and put it in medicine somewhere. I just have plant resin here. Yeah. I mean, it's a simple little concept. So, and now this is just like the hemp plant. I mean, good luck explaining hemp to people these days. Maybe at one point in time, it was like genetically something different, but really to explain to them, hemp is really, maybe there's still something there genetically for like fiber and grain, but at the same time, it's really more of like a political silo, where people have decided to put a line in the sand, and it's this 3% THC number at a certain time in the field before it's harvested. And, dirty secret, guess what? When they test it in the field, if they keep it for the 20 to 30 days, those numbers continue to climb. And and then when you harvest that, and then if you trim it and do all these other things, those numbers concentrate even more. So, what do these things mean? And then we get over to like the marijuana swim lane. Again, another political silo, because guess what? The dominant compound in there, THC, is, it's intoxicating. And interestingly enough, though, you can still grow CBD in a marijuana silo. It's actually more limiting in a way to grow like hemp and CBD products. Think about it. New York State, I think we'll get fingerprinted and get a federal background check to grow and sell.
Is that right?
Yeah, the non-intoxicating part of the cannabis genome, that hemp. And as I understand it right now, I don't even think we're going to have to get fingerprinted to become highly regulated licensed marijuana cultivators and manufacturers. So where's the common sense?
Absolutely
a fractured landscape of just kind of like abstract needlepoint. There's been these little threads of conversation, of legislation, and it's just this hodgepodge thing. It's being needlepoint. It just never came together in a big picture. It's just a thread here, a thread there, and there's this crisscross that just doesn't make any sense right now of regulations and policies.
Well, the one thing that we know, if you go back to the beginning of this industry here in the United States, we used to be able to walk into Sears and Roebuck and get hash. I mean, that was sitting right next to Payday Tobacco. And then William Randolph Hearst got his panties in a bunch over the Mexican government taking back his forest by eminent domain. And that's what pissed him off. And then he got DuPont involved, who DuPont was doing all kinds of things with petroleum with his buddies, the Rockefellers, and who's the Andrew Carnegie. And those guys all got together and said, oh, we got to stop this industry because it's our biggest competition. And they went after cannabis. They were really trying to stop hemp, but they went after cannabis. I have given this story in front of DEA agents at the whole thing, and people don't realize that this whole thing was like a huge setup. And then Rockefeller and Carnegie went after the herbal healers, and they stopped that research in labs that was occurring. And collectively, they battened it all down, got everybody dependent upon synthetics, oil, nylon, the whole thing, the whole pharma industry. That's what Rockefeller brought over all these scientists from Germany that were running the gas they were using in World War I and II to kill soldiers. And he brought those guys over and said, oh, let's make chemotherapy out of petroleum. And I mean, that's it. That's the truth. That's the real conspiracy, not even a conspiracy, a fact. And these guys went after the whole herbal industry and people we were so far advanced in that, further advanced than probably Israel is today. But I think it was in 1946, they created a law that destroyed all the textbooks, medical textbooks, research. It all was destroyed. And, that's where we ended up. And I mean, so right from the beginning, if people understood that this was really a healing plant, generations, thousands of years, people were using it. It evolved with us. If you understood the evolution of the cannabis and hemp plant, it literally evolved with us. When there were wars, THC increased. They were using it for probably PTSD and all the shit that would happen when you're killing people with swords, and on and on and on and on. And but the history gets lost, and people just look at it as a drug. It's not. It's far more than that. And on the hallucinogenic side, that's a whole other thing. But I'm all for the mushroom. I believe in the mushroom. I praise the mushroom. I pray to the mushroom gods. I think that is as important to be legalized as cannabis is, because I think it has a long, in the human, it has a longer. It's a more permanent thing than what you find sometimes. Josh, you're on the other side. I'm old. David's not as old, and you're young. So my question is, where is your generation in this pile of crap that we're constantly fighting through to get to a point where we have a legalized?
Well, I mean, my perspective on it from being in my 20s and my friends and my generation of people is, we have kind of broken through the stigma in a way where it is so normalized, and there wasn't as much. We had authority figures telling us this is something to be afraid of, but we kind of could see through the bullshit. And, the age of information, I remember researching, you were talking about Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie and Andrew Mellon. And he, so I remember learning about all that type of history and how it had been so suppressed, and everybody telling you, you shouldn't be using this. It's going to ruin your life. And, thinking to myself, these people don't know what the hell they're talking about, because this is helping me with my social anxiety. And I'm a musician. It was helping me with my creativity and just in general, just feeling like a more well-rounded person. So, and I've always felt like that. I mean, I guess not, that's the generational perspective that I have, but, really what my main takeaway here from hearing you guys talk about this is because I'm just a consumer, and I think any listeners listening might, this might resonate with them not being in the industry like you two are. It just sounds like just a total clusterfuck right now. I mean, it seems like I wanted legalization for years because I wanted to not have to be forced on the black market and to have some regulation and to have accountability and know what I'm buying and that it's safe and all that. And now it seems like that the legalization has happened and nothing can really catch up, and that there's kind of incentives for people to just continue on the black market. And I've seen that play out in my life too. I live in Buffalo. And I've got some friends that have a CBD place, and I was asking them when they're going to have flower, and they're like, it's kind of, we have some, but like just for you, so don't tell anybody. And
Right.
now, you know, with that perspective you guys just gave, it makes sense. I mean, they're probably saving $750,000 by just selling it to people they know like that. So,
Right.
you know, it just opens up the door to just the opposite of the spirit of the legalization that we were looking for so many years. So that's concerning to hear.
Yeah, and one of the things I do know, because when I got called by the reporter, I made a comment. Nobody liked it. I was just saying, hey, we're taking all the risk. Right? Nobody wanted to hear from me. Why are we taking this kind of risk? If I can just go out and open something illegal, not be worried about being arrested, maybe they confiscate my stuff, and but you can afford that risk if you're making $10,000 a day. Okay, come and take my shit, and you start all over again. That's what. Once the toothpaste is out of that tube, you're not getting it back in, and that's one of the
No.
scary parts about this.
And Josh,
Go ahead.
yeah, to Josh's point though, like the perception is, remember this bill, legalization, the bill is the MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act. So it's not like the Marijuana Legalization Act. It's like,
Right.
well, it's not legal, right? It's regulated and taxed. It's not truly free.
True.
Yeah.
It's if they really wanted to like to talk about California for a moment, I'm not extremely, I'm not necessarily the appropriate person, an expert at all things, but as I understand it, they had a pretty robust medical program. I think even at one point in time, one of the governors, that was like, a wink, wink. One of the best kept secrets in California is that everybody was a medical patient, and you had all these, referral shops on the street and these mom and pop compassionate care clinics. And it was real rootsy. And if we do dig back in those memory banks a little bit, the rumblings of like, oh, the legacy market, the black market, they didn't want it legalized. And at the time, you had to watch the propaganda because you're almost brainwashed to think, well, it's a bunch of criminals anyway. But now it's like, the whole thing's moved forward and hindsight's 2020. You're like, look, these folks were really talking about keeping the people's plant with the people, because regulation and taxation does just the opposite. It takes the plant away from the people.
Right.
And that's when it becomes toxic and dangerous, when we're talking about, medicine and the environment, when the people are removed from the equation here.
Right. And if you look at the industry from the beginning in California, because that's really where they were, I guess they were more progressive. I think it was Reagan at the time that was looking at legalizing it. And you remember what it was for glaucoma. You remember the guy who grew his the weed in his backyard for his glaucoma? I guess, I don't know. I've always had a difficult time focusing my eyeballs on something after. Not that I encourage weed smoking, but well, yes, I do. But I think, and I think that kind of started the whole thing in California. Was that this guy, he grew it. He said it was a necessity. It helped him with his eyes, and I think they created a law. He didn't get prosecuted because his eyesight was more important. His health, his eyesight was more important than the fact that he was growing something illegal, and they could prove scientifically, medically, I guess, that it actually did help his glaucoma. So I don't know in what way you're coping, but I remember his wife speaking about it in a YouTube video. But
why Reagan didn't get it done at that time, possibly, right? Because he had glaucoma too. He had anal glaucoma. He just couldn't see his ass doing that. Oh man, what a setup, brother! What a setup.
Yeah, wow. I got slayed on that.
Sorry.
Wide open.
Well, this is a PG show, right? Sorry. Beep.
No, this is not a child's
anal glaucoma.
Wait till you see the next episode we're doing it totally for children. We're going to talk about Santa Claus. So we got to we got to.
I need a mascara. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Scarves.
But the thing too, just to eat my words, because this happened to me. So when I did the interview, being ignorant at the time, not knowing everything, I knew about the stuff happening in parks. A dispensary opened up. Then later I get off the phone, I found out about all the bodegas and how you were just what you're saying, that the organized crime or cartels are built that network. Who knows how many of those? I bet you there's, they know how to do it. they're not, they're pretty smart.
There's a lot of factions. Like this isn't just like one group, you know, this isn't like, you know, Godfather movie stuff. I mean, this is like real modern developed world. There's a lot of different organized groups and cartels. There's not just one, you know, there's a lot of pieces.
Yeah. And so what do I do? I'm up at my factory, we're working. I'm talking about the industry, I'm talking about the article. And my brother looks at me and he goes, I thought it was legal. And I said, well, it's kind of in a gray area. I don't know that it's legal. You can have it, but it's just in this gray area. And I think police officers, the law enforcement, just kind of like, why bother? You know, they're beating the crap out of people almost to death, and nobody's going to jail for it. I got to believe they're like, who cares about a little weed? But so he's like, oh, you know, this buddy of mine and our cousin and this one, they've been buying it for the last 3 months from the vape shops in upstate New York. So I'm thinking to myself, too provincial, right? In upstate New York, we're not going to let that happen. Wrong. All day long, I'm wrong. And every vape shop, not every, but a large portion of the vape shops here in upstate New York are selling THC-8, you know, the Delta-8, rather, not THC-8, Delta-8 and cannabis. And some of them, where I was, I just had to check it out, have the cannabis right on the, you know, right next to the hemp. I'm like, what is going on? I'm just like, I gotta be honest. I really think we're in a Twilight Zone serial. And I'm just like, can you believe this? And it really is kind of discouraging for people who want to, you know, I'm thinking, yeah, we could build a great business with it. We can offer great product. Only problem is it's going to be 40% more. And what do we know about people who want to get high? They're not going to pay 40% more for something because they know they can go get it. I mean, in reality, it's a really sophisticated buyer, in my opinion. Yeah. And they know, oh yeah, they know the brand names. They know they can, you know, you can smell it. You can tell where you got good stuff or bad stuff. And I just don't know. I mean, where is the future of the industry? And in the meantime, here in Albany, you know, we've got a bunch of legislators that are, I think, a little clueless to the whole thing. I don't think they realize that, hey, the industry started without you guys, and we'll be at the finish line. We'll be there waiting for you with champagne and caviar. I think that in itself is just going to be, I don't know. I mean, I go both ways on this industry. I'm like, oh, people are still going to buy it. They're going to need someplace safe to buy it. Is that the case? But then can I compete with a 30-40% less product? I don't know.
I mean, if they're writing regulations, you know, where is the stakeholder advisory? You know, I don't want to hear like, well, we had a listening session and we opened the window for written comments. No. Like, you know, there's supposed to be these advisory boards in New York State and all of this stuff. And this happens like in almost like every other sector of business. Like here locally, right? I have a farm stand, and as an accessory to my farm stand, coming out of COVID, pivoting just because things were weird, interfacing, I bought a food truck, and it's a trend. It's actually a mobile kitchen right on my farm. We make our soup, stews, sauces, and hey, guess what? We also make these really amazing cream fried shiitake out of my organic mushrooms. And here's my point, though. So the town I live in, they attempted a few years ago to pass this food truck law that would allow farms to have them, and it failed. And so here I am a couple of years later, because I'm the type of guy that likes to be on the up and up. You know, I don't want this don't ask, don't tell, because that just means I might get in trouble someday or precluded from something else. Like that's no way to operate. It's not how I raised my daughter. So I go and I go to talk to the powers that be, and it still doesn't make sense. I was like, guys, we have to start with stakeholders. Like you can't just behind closed doors as regulators draft regulations and then maybe present them for comment. You know, you need to be interfacing with stakeholders, with people who understand how this plant works, not just looking at the regulators in the other states all along the process. And that's where really, I think, that's what we got to push for right now, is really to open those doors. Because think about it, any of us, we have an ego. It's the nature. And if we are chartered with drafting some regulations and creating some ideas in our mind out of, when we're done with our product and our document, we're going to be much less likely to go all the way back to the beginning and change probably what was a faulty direction versus if we were halfway done writing it and somebody made a good point, a good argument, a persuasive statement, you'd be like, oh, wow, you know what? You're right. I should scrap this direction and move in one altogether. So it's really important at this time to make sure, these advisory boards get formed at the state level, because as I understand it, nobody's in there right now. And even at these municipal levels, like after we've had all these opt-out debates, right? This deadline that was the New Year's 2021. The nature of my advocacy work right now is to go to revisit every municipality again, whether they opted out or not, to get these boards together to figure out the zoning stuff that's in the MRTA, the law, the statute, getting these maps and prerequisites together. So when the regulations drop, they have a working group already in place, and people aren't doing that. So when we ask, why is this taking so long? Why are we living in the twilight zone? It's because nobody's doing anything. And when I say nobody, we can't always just blame it on the folks upstairs. It's the people right here in our towns also. It's the nature of the entire process here in New York. And unfortunately, the country at large, things just take so long, right? It's only the biggest fire that all the firemen are rushing to right now. There's a million of them in the state. And
Right.
So that's like my call to action here. We want to see this stuff change. We have to, whatever capability you have right now, just start calling people and just get involved in that process. Because left to their own devices without stakeholders at intimate levels in these conversations, we're not going to wind up with good outcomes. And not because they're bad people or they had bad ideas, they were just lacking the proper team or guidance.
Right. And another thing that really bothers me about the industry, they compare it to the booze industry, wine, liquor. I don't think you can, because the bottom line, there's a barrier to entry with booze. You got to have plant, you got to have, there's a lot. There's an investment there. There's processes there with the outcome of alcohol. This is, you grow the plant, you harvest it, you held it upside down for a few days, for however long you're going to let it dry. Then you trim it, cut it, do whatever you're going to do to it and sell it. It's not the same. They're always kind of making that comparison that, oh no, this is like alcohol. No, it's not. And it's not at all as damaging to society as alcohol. That's my belief on that. But the thing is I just don't know. This is the question we have, our investors, what is the ultimate end to this? I mean, once you have the magnitude of that many, we're talking about 14,000 outlets, as far as bodegas are concerned, what is the outcome of that? What is the damage that's occurred? And then now, me being, ignorant, wandering around in upstate New York, I didn't know any of this stuff was happening. My first enlightenment to that was meeting with you guys. And then the second thing was a telephone call from this reporter, the cell phone call from this reporter. And I just don't know. I don't think it's been thought through perfectly. Not that it would ever be perfect, but when you begin to realize, and this is part of why we're having this discussion, that there's that many outlets right now selling to the consumer. Consumers think they're buying something legally. And are they buying something legally? They may be. I don't know, right? I can have 3 grams in my pocket. What is the number that they've said we can walk around in our pocket?
3 ounces right now.
Oh, it's 3 ounces. Okay.
And 5 pounds at 5 pounds at home. Remember, that fits together with the pending regulations. The 5 pounds will make sense once we finally have adult use home grow or medical home grow. Then you'll be like, oh, that's where we get it from. And the state's made it clear, the only place to acquire legal cannabis right now is through the medical cultivation and retail outlets. Interesting thing too, Greg, so you picked this 1,400 dispensary or bodega number, right? I mean, there's like, yeah. And you say if 10%, because I'm hearing it's like almost every corner bodega from these customers. Again, this is anecdotal. This is just people from Manhattan and the boroughs that are saying, yeah, on my corner store, I can go and get a bag just like that. My cup of coffee, a sandwich, whatever.
Bagel.
as I understand it, I mean, the state is likely not even anticipating having anywhere close to that number of dispensaries in the entire state.
Great point.
So this is the current state of affairs. This is the disconnect. Is is there this much demand and this much supply on the back end? Again, are they counting the stickers? I mean, who are they getting this data from?
Right.
No.
And the bottom line is, you never know with the black market, right? They've tried to figure out for years what the cash that flows through from person to person and businesses to businesses. They've never really, they've put numbers on that, but they don't know whether they're right or wrong about that.
And so like the dispensary count, as I think they're going to do like per capita for the population. I think New York's got what, about 20 million? I think there's 20 million New Yorkers right now in the state, I do believe. So if we have one dispensary per 50,000 adults, right?
Yes.
That's 400 dispensaries in the entire state, not Manhattan, not the boroughs, not Long Island, the entire state. Those are some big businesses. I'm not a mathematician. I do love punching around on the calculator, and it's fun just to like figure things sometimes. But I'm sure if we look into some of these projections, I mean, these are sizable businesses. So, we talk about generational wealth and the ability to do this and that. But I mean, at the same time, also, I mean, we've got to provide opportunity for the small and medium-sized people. Each one of these entities has a little C-suite, like an executive suite at the top. And if you have 100, if you have $1 billion company in New York, or do you have 100, or do you have 1,000 $1 million companies? Of course, I'd want the $1,000 million companies.
Right.
There's just going to be a lot more to go around opportunity-wise. So these are a lot of the messages right now. People, we need to get on the microphones, the phones, the papers, whatever, the cliff, and just start talking to people like yesterday.
Right.
Before they're done writing these regulations, because like I was saying, once you're done with something, you're less likely to go back to the beginning and choose a new direction.
Right.
This is the formative time.
Right. And a great quote by Mark Twain, figures don't lie, but liars will surely figure. When you look at the growth of the industry, so everybody's saying, "Oh my God, we had a 64% growth this year. We had a this and a that." And guess what? Does that matter? Because here's what we don't know. California being the example of that. The only reason we have growth is because we're going from zero to something. Okay. So states are coming online every day. That's increasing sales. When we're looking at that, they're reporting sales. It does not mean anything in reality. What's more interesting is going back to the states that have been legal for the last few years to see if those numbers have been increasing or have they been decreasing. And we don't know the industry. I don't care about this new state. They should separate those numbers out and say, okay, here's the growth in states that have been in business for 2 years and more, and here's the growth in new online states that are coming online, and then eventually merge those together to come up with a real number. When you say there's been a 74% growth in the cannabis market, oh my God, it's booming, and we expect it to be 60 billion or 81 billion or 100 billion, does not mean anything, because
unless you day trade stocks.
Exactly. So those numbers don't mean anything, and there's no way to really measure the effectiveness of what we're trying to accomplish out here. And when you look at that revenue number from California, where they've had a 12.5% quarter-to-quarter decline, that is serious shit. In any business, any Amazon or anybody else, if they saw those kinds of declines in their numbers, there'd be some lynching going on with shareholders. I mean, there'd be a really, there'd be a call to arms on that one. And the thing too, that this is that upstate New York is like, there's no capital up here. I call it like wasteland for capital.
I thought it was the capital region. God.
Yeah, well, there's a capital. It's right in back of me, right over here. It's right over here somewhere. Oh no, that way. It's over that way. But as far as helping out people that are trying to get into business, especially minorities who may not have been in any businesses, and they're thinking, this is the business I want to be in. It's a great business. It is. I believe it is. But when they have to go raise capital, there's a $200 million pot that the governor said, yeah, we're going to use this for companies who are trying to get started. That $200 million pot is, I don't know how we're going to get access to that. And it's just for minorities, which is fine. But, a lot of times there's a lot of barriers to get to that, the way that they either have none or they have tons.
Yeah, so
And
that social equity fund of 200 million, as I understand it, is actually kind of just like bench level. That fund may increase to 3, 4, and 500 million over time. As I understand it, also, yes, for social equity applicants, and right now it's just for dispensaries, right? So those of us who are interested in, I get it, it's more complicated, cultivation, manufacturing, more speculative, but this is just for dispensaries even. And it's going to be supposedly a cross between public and private equity. And as I understand it, these ROs, the 10 companies, and I also heard they're going to open up for a few more here. Great, open up the back door. I guess you just need the money that much, right?
Yeah.
That they're going to pay this lump sum of money, whether it's one time or annual of millions and millions of dollars that's going to seed this fund. So it's just really crazy. This abstract needlework of like, well, we used to work like this, but now we're coming from this direction. At a certain point, when can somebody have the ability actually to go back and eradicate a whole path and start a new one? It's virtually impossible. We wind up with this ragtag patchwork.
My Irish mother had a saying, not her saying, but she used it quite frequently. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so when you look at
hemp farmers,
so when you look at here's my worry, just being really upfront about it, and I'm sure some of our legislators may look at this podcast, but what my concern is that they're leaving this wide open for the big guys. And we're just going to get squashed. We didn't even get into medical marijuana and where they're at and where they've got a jump start on the consumer component of it pretty significantly. And that's not a level playing field. Okay. No. And so, everybody's intentions are great. I don't know. I mean, I've seen lots of shit in my life. You've seen lots of shit. Josh, you will see lots of shit if you haven't already.
Already seen them.
Yeah, we're at a point where I just don't know what the intention is of the state and our elected officials toward this industry, because I think it's noble. I think we should be allowing minorities to get into a ground floor business, get into a ground floor industry. But it seems like they may have already, and they're doing it, and there could be, at some point the number's going to come out. And I love when I go to the headlines, because you've got like the wise cannabis entrepreneur. We've got a cannabis entrepreneur here in Albany that wants to raise $30 million to build a small upstate village. I don't know why he's doing that, but when you look at all the articles, here's a breakdown of all the cannabis business opportunities in New York, all real flowery bullshit articles. Obviously, no reporters digging into this stuff, figuring out what really is going on. As usual, we have no reporting. They all sit there at the legislature when anybody tells them they're, jotting it down. We don't have any real solid, good reporting. Like this guy, this Bill Weinberg, who went in and really he dug into it, wrote an article, and but there's none of that going on. Really, the nuts and bolts of what it takes. You've got the political process over here, and you've got business people over here, and nobody's talking to one another. And I don't know that we have even a channel to talk to them, except through our, if you can afford the lobbyists and all that. But at the same time, I don't know that that's a great discussion, because it's not really you're talking.
That's not a discussion.
Yeah, it's not a discussion in an open debate where everybody can hear what's going on. That to me is the real way to figure out how we make this industry work.
Yeah,
But
I've literally had, remember I was telling you how the nature of my advocacy work right now, going back to all the municipalities, hey, let's get all these advisory boards so we can start figuring this out.
yes,
I've gotten feedback directly from town supervisors and other officials, and I'm not going to name anybody in particular, that's not right,
right,
that they're not ready to have somebody advise them on this. Like,
right.
so there's, one person saying, no, I am not ready to give this to the people.
Right.
Like, are you trying to make this your legacy? I mean,
Well, I
people
mean,
need to let go.
yeah, well, I mean, then you get into a whole other discussion about, when elected officials have a lot of power and they're listening to themselves and not the constituents. And that's a whole other, we could talk about the federal government, because boy, I'll tell you, if there's something impeding this industry big time and the potential tax dollars at the state and federal level, it's the federal government. I mean, they should be prohibition. When prohibition got to this point, alcohol got to this point, the federal government finally stepped in and said, okay, we'll come in and we'll get involved and we'll allow it state to state. And you won't have to worry about the FBI busting your door down. And, local law enforcement was good with it, but the federal government wasn't. And they're impeding this industry pretty significantly. And let's be honest, we didn't even talk about this. The credit card issue, if you want to get into conspiracy theories, the whole credit card issue on CBD, we had heard through the grapevine was pharma saying, hey, if you guys do this for this industry, we're going to pull our money offshore and you'll be SOL. And I don't know whether that's true, but I heard that from a pretty reliable source. At the time, I was getting my brains beat in because I was trying to find a credit card. I didn't really care. I just got to find somebody. But I'm sure you had the offshore shit that you could go do, and it was dangerous. We have tried with New York State to get the credit unions involved early on, so that there's an infrastructure to deal with cash and cards and transactional. But the credit card industry still. I mean, I'll be honest. I'm in the process of changing the website. We're redoing our website. We're switching over to another platform that's more cohesive that we're trying to accomplish. Banking, and I was on the phone with the bank.
New labels look great, by the way. Checking that stuff out. I'm creeping on you.
I wish I could take credit for those, but there's our marketing team is the ones that do that. But what I was going to say is that I was talking to a bank. And they're like, I got a call from them that said, hey, we need to see your federal inspections. I'm like, is there a federal inspection? What? A federal inspection? I said, they don't even know that there is such a thing as hemp or cannabis. What about the farm law? I don't know. I don't know. Right? The federal government's just missing in action on this whole thing. And people think that is, they don't know, even for us to go get a manufacturing or producer license right now, you've got that because you were on the bottom floor of that. But if you weren't on the bottom floor of that, you're a year away from getting that at this point.
Getting in early with a hemp license. If I got it later, I would have been richer. I wouldn't have spent as much money.
Right, you wouldn't have had to invest all that money.
No,
right?
The credit card stuff, the insurance stuff, the capital finance stuff. It all really just has to deal with, how the federal government classifies this plant, how it schedules it, and some of its derivatives like CBD. And it's just hung up. Again, that rare random thread somewhere that's just holding up the whole show. And that sweater is never going to look pretty until you get rid of that thread. And
right.
It's just going to be hanging there. And that really is that fundamental challenge. How do we prevent that from happening? And we just have to figure out ways to get more and more involved, having conversations like this, podcasts, open forums, showing up to town hall meetings, just getting a cohesive message going, acting as a coalition, just a group of aligned folks.
Right.
In Ray Low, I call it. So when you look at a Venn diagram and you have those overlapping circles, if you have three of them, there's like this curvy triangle called a Ray Low triangle. And I really enjoy using that term because it doesn't necessarily mean you're in alignment. It doesn't even necessarily mean you're in agreement. It's just like there's this common ground. Right. Even if you're enemies, for the sake of debating or some situational things. Just, hey, we're in Ray low on this. Look, we don't agree, but there's just this space here where we happen to both be. And that's what we need to find.
Yeah, and I wish that some of these elected officials could see what good, we always hear about getting high in head shops and all this bullshit. If they could see some of the kids with autism who are using these products, we have a whole group. We have a group of families that we give the CBD to because it's had such a dramatic effect on these kids with autism, brain injury, epileptic seizure. We work with neurologists and doctors. You never work with them. You work through the family because the doctors can't take that risk. But the point is that when you can see what this kind of stuff does and getting the mushrooms, I mean, that is a whole other, that is just for kids with autism. I'm like, totally. I think it's something that can affect them so positively. But when you're talking about CBD and cannabis, and you've seen, you know this, PTSD issues with vets or people who've gone through really awful trauma, and they're using it therapeutically to treat. They're not getting on these, these drugs that you get from the pharma industry. They're relying on this. They're taking heavy dose, medium dose, light dose, whatever they need to do to cope. And they're getting off those drugs that stop them from sleeping. They can't do function. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, if they could understand that, I just don't know how you get that across to them. I'm sure right? I've experimented with THC. I can remember taking this oil, right? And I was like, I took one time. They said, take the size of a seed, a small seed. What are those? A poppy seed. Take a poppy seed. I took it. It didn't do anything, right? So I was home and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna, poppy seed didn't do anything. So let me try 7 poppy seeds, right? And I took it and I didn't do anything, right? I'm like, I'll go to bed. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up. I thought it was going to vibrate through the mattress into the garage. Got up, was like, holy shit, was nauseous, right? But you just have to chill out and go back to bed. The point is that with this is, if you've experimented with this stuff, and I have CBD too, we took a bunch of us and we said, well, how big is this kid? If a kid took a bottle, what would happen to him? We took that proportion amount of CBD. I slept for like 15 hours, best sleep I ever had, woke up, felt like Superman the next day. But all of this stuff, when you're experimenting with it, when we don't test on animals, we test on us, right?
Yes. Or your mom.
Or your mom. I done it with my mom. Yeah. Like I was pretty.
My poor mom.
Flamed up, yes.
Love you, Mom.
Yeah. So, but once you're doing that, and my daughter, I have a daughter with Down syndrome, and she uses CBD every day. Unbelievable, if you met her and could see her. But it's just really difficult for these people to understand that this isn't a dangerous thing. It's not something that needs to be regulated into the high hills. The thing is, we're the most sophisticated consumers in the world, yet our government's always trying to protect us, which I'm always skeptical of. I'm always skeptical when the government says, we're doing this for you. I'm like, nah, there's some other reason you're up, you're here trying to decide how my life runs. So, but, with that said, I don't know. Do we have anything else that we should be talking about?
No, but I just wanted to mirror your sentiments there. When we talk about experimentation and bringing it to advocacy and speaking out and bridging and guiding, it's when we begin to use these things in our life, when we learn how to respect them, how to use them appropriately. And then we have a conversation like this, friend to friend, peer to peer. And then other people possibly try and experiment over time, just like CBD. It just happened to work really well, apparently, not according to the FDA. They don't have much to say, but anecdotally around town, I mean, within 12 months of, things being like commercially available, within 2 years, I mean, it was like this exploding phenomenon because, it worked. And so it's kind of like, that tipping point on the scale. So, I'm never going to advocate for anybody to put themselves in a potentially dangerous situation, but I'm sure there's many people out there who know trusted and vetted people who can guide them through journeys that they wish to experience. And then I absolutely urge anybody, though, to share that information with other people. And that's how we discover what the truth and the reality is. I don't mean to be blind and sound stupid. I only know what's in my hands, but very often for the sake of science, I only know after I've observed it, even if I've,
Right.
influenced the observation and the outcome. But, it's very important for us to share, that first person anecdotal information, because at the end of the day, that's the only way we're going to know how this stuff works or not. That's the only way,
Right.
Greg, you or myself, as formularies, brand owners with these products can help walk people through it. Otherwise, we're just like reading off another trifold, pamphlet like in a store, or it's like, hey, look, I've been using it for sleep in conjunction with other stuff, or my back, but I also, see an orthopedic oncologist for the hip or degenerative disc.
Right.
Like, when you experiment on your mom and your wife, maybe your daughter and yourself, that's when we really find those truths in these new territories. And when I
Right.
say find the truth, it's not even kind of like learning them for the first time. A lot of the stuff we're just finding out about that. I think you said it at the beginning of our talk here today, our conversation, that, history's kind of like been erased.
Yeah.
Human beings were very good at that, of being tidy little creatures. Let's just, chisel that off the rock, and 20 years, nobody will even remember it was there.
You want to know the FDA, just to go back to that real quick, recalls about
Yeah.
4,800 medicines and medical equipment, 48 pieces of medicine and medical equipment a year. So, the FDA brought us the opiate crisis, and not a single person, that family that brought us the opiates, who knew it was highly addictive, the show's been on TV with Michael Keaton, not one of those have been put in prison. Nothing has happened to them. They knew what it was. They have the evidence, and they are living a life like you and I can only think about. That's number one. But the whole thing is that anecdotally, that's where it all starts anyway. And this is something that's been around for a few thousand years. It's not like it just showed up like an opiate. We know what this does. We know its effect on the human race, and it's been nothing but positive. The whole concept that it's addictive, not addictive. That you're going to go to, it's a gateway drug. Bullshit. Anybody who's going to go do a gateway drug is going to go do a gateway drug. They're not, they've got something wrong. They're unhappy. They're trying to, they're going to use booze. They're going to use whatever. Most of them end up sticking a needle in their main vein of their arm. So, we're chasing a dragon or whatever it is they're going to do. They're not sticking around with cannabis. That's not going to be their choice of drug. It's not where they stay. But, there's still a lot of shadowy phobia that exists in this particular space. Mushrooms too. I always am like, when somebody starts, oh my God, a mushroom. I said, you have it on your pizza. What's wrong with something you're gonna, dose in a 0.5 milligram or more, or whatever you want to do? But
I've had Magic Mini pizzas.
I am right there. I am there on the mushroom thing, big time. I just think it's probably one of the most important things we can do, and get those legalized in New York. And I heard they were going to try that. So I was always wondering.
As I understand it, there has been some sort of legislation possibly submitted for consideration. Very often a bill or something of the sorts gets submitted, and it sticks around for a while and gets whittled away, year after year, before it starts to pick up some momentum. It's wholly my personal opinion, nothing more than my opinion, that within probably 2 years' time, with some of the dust settling, with adult use cannabis here, psilocybin, magic mushrooms will be addressed. It's already being addressed in other large states, municipalities, who are years ahead of us, with some of this more progressive drug policy. And from some of my research, I mean, when you look around, to me, it seems, again, this is my perspective and opinion. I'm not reading articles. It's just my experience that I am seeing many organizations, and as I have conversations about this stuff, people say, oh, my friend, they're part of this partner group and this research. There's big money, there's big science. Psychology is like, there's a lot of momentum and formative motion in the psilocybin space. And I think that really is going to be, that's going to be a floodgate when that one opens up. There's going to be a lot of like big organizations, monetized, organized, really just ready to hit beep, not even like a layman's market on that. I think there's going to be a lot of science that's just all of a sudden going to be poof in the sunlight. I think that's going to really happen fast, be profound and kind of heavy in an enlightening way. if one
I'll
could say
tell you,
that.
hey, Josh, who was the podcast we did with the, I can't think of his name right now, the peyote ceremonies?
Oh, Bob.
Huh?
Bob was his name, right? Bob
Yeah,
Vetter.
Bob
Vetter.
Bob Vetter, yeah. Bob Vetter. Well, see, I call him the younger guy to remember those things. Bob Vetter, he talked about
Brains.
peyote. And that was really an interesting, the whole concept of peyote ceremonies. They healed his mother 1,500 miles away. It's really interesting. I'm going to have him back on because he had a lot to say about American history, American Indian history, and what we did. Talk about COVID, what we did with smallpox, and some of the other shit we've done to American Indians is just unbelievable.
Hey, I was just about to bring up prayer work, remote viewing, and Hado medicine, and he brings up the smallpox blanklets. Jesus.
Yeah, no, but he was very interesting. The peyote thing is an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah.
And but I think there's a lot of things that have been taboo that purposely have been taboo. I still think DMT is a plot against the human race to stop us from. They say that just to get back, closing things up in a conspiracy, obviously, that the Samsung phone, that folding phone. I think you and I talked about this before. Yeah. That was numerous DMT trips by South Korean engineers talking to the machine elves that you meet when you do the DMT thing, and that's how they came up with that folding phone, which they're about to make a TV out of that material. So it's an interesting.
Well, Greg, I think more research is in order, in order to achieve that breakthrough. To really understand.
I think we should. They say that all these technology gurus are hitting the DMT all the time to give them an edge.
All of this stuff, nootropics. I mean, whether meandering around here for a second, but just cannabis as a performance enhancing thing, even microdosing psilocybin as like a little cheat drug. These pills. I mean, there's been movies about it. I mean, these compounds. There's so many things either that we need to learn for the first time, or we basically need to learn as in remember and discover from the past. There's just so much to this right now. There's so much good that can be brought to people's lives, but again, only when we respect this and we have reverence. Just like when it's the people's plant and they're the custodians of the plant, it's medicine. And just like with psilocybin and these other psychedelics, when we talk about set and setting, I mean those are profound parameters, and dosing size and coaching and intention. So we need to really, as much as we hear about these what we need to discover for ourselves, what is the set and the setting, what is the intention? How do I work this German multi-tool? When the instruction shows up, it's all in German. How do we interpret this?
Right.
We've all seen the infomercial. Now we want to make it work at home for us.
Yeah. And it's always intention too, with a lot of this stuff, especially the hallucinogenics and things. I think it really matters what your mindset is when you're experimenting with it, but
you got to know what you're trying to get out of it. But
yeah,
it's been encouraging to hear, you have a little bit more of an insight from you two with more insider knowledge. Cause I mean, it's been great to see definitely more accepting. It feels like there's, a renaissance in terms of public perception of these types of substances. And we've come a long way from, all the propaganda, but, it'll be great to see some institutional catch up because there's definitely a lag, but that's what I've been learning. Cause I was going to come in here today and ask you guys like, hey, when are we going to be able to get it in the stores? But I know that's a little bit more complicated than I was hoping for.
Right.
I mean, you can, but you should.
I mean, I guess that I got my answer.
Gotta
go look around.
Well, with that said, I've got to run, but it's been great with you guys. We'll have this out shortly, and I hope the legislators look at it. I hope they listen to what we're saying. I understand the difficulty of legislation and the why it takes a lot of time to do it. We're not knocking anybody. We're just saying, here's some insight to some things we know. We're in the trenches. We're hand-to-hand combat every day. We're really dealing with as they say, shit rolls downhill. We are eating it, swilling in it, swimming in it, you name it. It's not easy. New industries are not easy. But with that said, I say this, just remember one thing. There's more of us than there is of them.
Yeah,
So,
there is.
yeah, at some point they've got to, they have to listen to what we have to say. So, but with that said, I'll see you guys soon.
Later, guys. It was a real honor and a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
YagiBox.com